Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We're in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show. We are getting set and ready for the WNBA season, just a few days away, and today we're going to talk about a team that is still looking to find its championship form. Injuries have gotten in the way in previous seasons, had a healthy season last year, fortunately, but we'll see if this squad has what it takes. That team is the Washington Mystics. To talk Mystics, I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Jenn Hatfield. Jenn, formerly with Her Hoop Stats and 538, currently the women's sports writer and managing editor at the Next Hoops. And I also saw a Harvard field hockey alum. That's pretty cool. But thank you so much, Jenn, for taking the time. I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to talk Mystics as we get close to the opener.
Yes, this will be released just a few days before as one of the last teams in alphabetical order. But as we start to talk Mystics, can this be a magical year in Washington?
Sure, I think so. They've got plenty of great pieces, and obviously their championship hopes also depend on the other 11 teams around the league. But there's a buoyancy, a vibrancy around the Mystics this preseason. They're all seemingly very locked in, very excited about the group they have. It's a very deep group. Knock on wood, everyone appears to be healthy or trending in that direction at the very least. So things are looking good in Washington so far.
It's a team that's very near and dear to my heart. I wrote for Monumental Sports and Entertainment about the Mystics last season, and I am very excited about where they could go, their potential. I think they just need to grasp onto it. But as we get into this team, I want to take a step back to last season where they finished 22-14. They were in that top tier, that top 5 contending teams list. Unfortunately, they wound up last in the regular season. Heading into the playoffs, that did line them up with a matchup, which was Sue Bird's last career playoff run and wound up being Brianna Stewart's last playoff run with the Seattle Storm. So that wrapped up the Mystics season, but they finished the regular season 7th in offensive rating at 101.1, a defensive rating of 96.0. That was best in the league. What were your takeaways from last season for this Mystics team?
Yeah, it kind of feels like, especially looking back on it now, it kind of feels like last season was a bridge season. They were getting Elena Delle Donne back in fits and starts. She would play some games, sit out others, and they had to navigate that all season. Alicia Clark was healthy, but sometimes not fully comfortable with who she was post a pretty serious foot injury. And then Myisha Hines-Allen got hurt. Or was dealing with knee pain and ended up having off-season surgery. So it was kind of this bumpy year, ups and downs, that quick playoff elimination. And, sometimes you just have to go through uneven stretches to be able to be a more consistent team in the future. And so particularly if they can deliver on that this year and be that kind of consistent team, I think it'll look even more like it was just kind of a necessary I don't want to say bump in the road, because overall it was a very good season, but a necessary stepping stone to who and where they want to be.
A few important offseason moves to get into for this roster, but I am curious from your standpoint, I guess from your vantage point, can you tell where is this team at injury-wise?
Pretty much everybody is good to go. Myisha Hines-Allen is kind of the exception there. So she had knee surgery in September, a partial patellar tendon repair, for those of you who are well versed in knee ligaments. But her recovery process was a little bit slower than anticipated. They were hoping to get her back on the court early in the new year, and that slipped a little bit. She is playing 5-on-5 now. In the past couple of days, she has gotten rid of this leg sleeve that she would wear on that leg. It was She was like kind of over it, and she's been out of a brace for a little while. So I asked head coach Eric Thibault yesterday, which for those listening, yesterday is May 13th. I asked him if the season opener was today, would Maisha play? And he said no, and that's because of her conditioning. They just need to get her conditioning back up because they're very mindful of that right now. Because when she gets tired, her running form can slip a little bit, and they can't have that just to keep her healthy and good. So they just need to get her her conditioning back up. She's still trying to refocus, make sure she finishes layups because she's still working off a little bit of rust, but she is close, is kind of my TLDR there. And then Elena Deladon is by all accounts healthy, ready to go. By her account, is not expected to miss any games. We haven't heard that from Thibault yet, one way or another. But all indications are she's going to be ready to play. And so, yeah, pretty much everybody else has been healthy. They've been ramping up some people slower than others if they played a lot overseas, or in the case of Kristi Tolliver, didn't play at all this offseason while she was coaching. But knock on wood, no major injuries to report.
That is wonderful to hear, especially for this Mystics team, which has gone through it the last couple of years since winning that 29 championship. Speaking of that 29 championship team, there is a change up top for this roster. And you mentioned it, Mike Thibault, the head of the Snake, he calls it quits, but stepping into his shoes, Eric Thibault. Before we talk about that change, really, I want to ask you about Mike's impact as not only the person who won the WNBA title for the Mystics. He's a 3-time coach of the year, the winningest coach in WNBA history. What was his impact on the Mystics organization and really the city of Washington?
Oh my gosh, he's had a huge impact and continues to as general manager. But in his decade at the helm, he the Mystics got fan support before he showed up. But the problem was that for large stretches, they just weren't a contender. They really struggled for much of their history before Mike Thibault came along. And Mike Thibault kind of put them on a slow and steady trajectory toward the top of the league. Obviously culminating in that 2019 title. So he really turned around that franchise, in part through the draft, where he's, established himself as someone who always sees but manages to win Washington. And then he's also made shrewd moves in free agency. He brought Elena Deladon to Washington. He brought Kristi Tolliver to Washington. He's been able to get a lot of things done, attract a lot of talent. Players want to play for him. They like his system. He's really just turned around the franchise and elevated it to something that not only people want to watch, but they expect to succeed and continue to raise the bar for.
Truly a special coach and a special person atop this Mystics organization. And as they make the move, it is to someone who has been with the team for a long time, not only familiar as an assistant for the last 10 years and associate head coach for the last 4, but the son of former head coach Mike Thibault, Eric Thibault. What do you think he kind of brings that could be different from Coach Mike Thibault? And do you expect any changes as far as system goes heading into the year?
I think it's probably about 90% consistent. As you said, Eric has been with Mike not just throughout his career in Washington, but even before that. Eric started as a practice player for Mike Thibault's Connecticut Sun teams. So he's literally grown up in this. He's an active role, even before ascending to head. Last year he would sometimes run drills and Mike wouldn't run them, and Eric, and it was totally normal. And so it's really and I mean, Eric has also coached several games as the interim head coach, so the players are used to that as well. So it's really, Mike's still there. He's just sitting on the sidelines, relaxing, enjoying not having to do daily media obligations. Those are in Eric's court now. Eric's running the show on the court, kind of same as ever. So I would say really not a lot is changing. There may be some changes at the margins in terms of plays, and Eric's really making a point. And not that Mike didn't, but Eric's making a point to have the players weigh in. And sometimes it's I want them to call the play or them to solve this problem. And I'm not going to always be the one to do it for them. So I think it's just a very like natural progression in a lot of ways, from Mike to Eric, and with this veteran group around him that knows him so well too, that's kind of like greased the wheels as well.
That's really nice, and uh, I guess that's it's a cool family thing as well with the Tebows, and like you said, Mike is hanging around, but excited to see Eric Tebow at the helm as well, and see where this team goes as we start to look at some of the changes in the offseason for the Mystics and their roster. They really held a lot of their pieces together, retaining almost the entirety of the core. Ariel Atkins, Natasha Cloud, Shakira Austin, Elena Deladon, Aisha Hines-Allen, and Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. That, with the exception of Alicia Clark, which I am pretty high on, but not a whole lot of roster turnover. You lose Clark and two solid role players off the bench in Rui Machida, Elizabeth Williams. But the Mystics bring in Brittany Sykes, Christy Tolliver, Amanda Zowie B, and Emily Insler, who I am high on as well, along with a few others to the training camp roster. I want to start with, how big of a loss is Alicia Clark?
I think at her peak, Alicia Clark is a huge loss. The thing is, she never reached her peak in Washington. So she was on a 2-year deal in Washington. The first year, she was completely lost due to injury. And then last year, kind of as I said earlier, she was still kind of getting her groove back. So like at her peak, she is the quintessential like 3-and-D small forward. But we saw more of the D than the 3 last year from her. And I think she'll be great this year for Las Vegas. But as far as replacing her, I think Brittany Sykes fills that defensive void. It's big shoes to fill, but Sykes can do that, no problem. They're both former all defensive players. Like, she's got that down. And then the shooting, like I said, Alicia Clark wasn't a career year for her from 3, but if you're looking for more 3-point shooters, which the Mystics were in free agency, Sykes, that isn't her strength necessarily, but they're bullish that she can shoot the 3 better. And then they also added Christy Tolliver, who is a great 3-point shooter. So, they're really optimistic that even if it's not quite exactly like 1-for-1 swaps, that they've kind of patched some holes that way.
Jen, I saw kind of obviously the whole left defensively. I agree with you with Brittany Sykes. Again, huge on her as well. I think she's a phenomenal perimeter defender, especially will guard the other team's best player. But you've got a lot of players on this Washington Mystics team who can do that. I am curious about kind of the shooting woes. Like you mentioned, Alicia Clark didn't have the best year. The Mystics didn't have the best year shooting wise, especially once it got into the postseason, in my opinion, at least. Do you feel like they shored up some of those issues, as you mentioned, Christy Tolliver, in this offseason?
So I think Christy definitely helps. I think another thing is less personnel and more just like overall offense. Eric has talked this preseason about how last year, with Elena resting her back so much, she often didn't get to practice. And when she doesn't get to practice, that means that it's hard for the Mystics to walk through how other teams are defending her, which is unique from any other player, and then figure out. It didn't look super fluid either, because players were like, oh, I'm playing with Elena today. Oh, I'm not playing with Elena tomorrow. Or because they just hadn't quite had that practice time all together to like really be comfortable, like adjusting to what was being thrown at them if it was something different. So I think naturally that shooting should get better this year, as the teams had so much continuity through training camp. Everyone was on time this year, which is a big thing. They've gotten to work with each other for a couple of weeks now, and Elena has participated fully. So they're really able to know their personnel a little bit better than they did last year. And I think that that's going to help them get better shots, easier shots. And then hopefully those will go down. You kind of cross your fingers there. So I think that plus Tolliver, and then, maybe a player like Maisha Hines-Allen shoots the ball a little bit better since her knee is feeling better. Maybe Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, she kind of came on late, like started in this big slump and then came out of it. Maybe she shoots the ball a little bit better to start. Individual players, I think, may be able to tick up their percentages a little bit too. And then it's partly the system. Yeah.
So hopefully a few more reps can help these players ease in a little bit better on offense. I like that. I still, I guess one last spot with the free offseason moves, I kind of see a hole at kind of that small forward spot. Like you mentioned, Alicia Clark is the prototypical 3-and-D small forward. Do you feel that there's a hole there? I know Brittany Sykes coming in to replace the defense, but feels like more of a guard. What do you think about that position specifically?
Yeah, I've had some conversations about this, and I like totally see that they don't really have your prototypical like wing player necessarily, but I'm not super convinced it's like a problem per se. I mean, if they had like an elite wing along with what they have right now, you would probably say they have too many guards. And I am not concerned about Sykes, Cloud, or Atkins being able to guard a three on any other team. Like one of them will be fine on whatever that matchup is. It'll depend on like who it is, which Mystic draws that assignment, but I'm not concerned about it on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, I think either like going with those three guards or bringing in Walker Kimber off the bench or Taller off the bench, she wouldn't be the three, but any combination of those five guards I think would be more than serviceable on the court. And then you can also do some three big lineups if you want. You could like put Elena Deladon at the three. I don't hate it. Maisha can play the three. So I think they have a lot of options, even if they don't quite look like what you necessarily would say is like your prototypical three. I think that they can put a lot of different looks at that position.
I like that. I like that as well. I didn't really consider some of the three bid lineups, but again, like you said, I really do feel good about the guards. The bids with Amanda Zawabi, Maisha Hines-Allen off the bench, that is also really solid, backing up some really solid front court
Yeah.
players to start. One last piece that I want to touch on in the offseason was the draft. The Mystics decide to move on from that number 4 overall pick. Ended up being Stephanie Suarez, sent to the Dallas Wings for I believe it was a 24 second round pick from the Winds and a 25 first from Atlanta. And in that move, I was a little surprised by it. What were your initial reactions and what do you think of the move?
I think it makes total sense. The gist of it is the Mystics weren't completely sold on anyone at that level of the draft and decided to kick the can down the road. They've got such a deep group right now that whoever would have been in that 4 spot would have had a tough time making this roster. They're already having trouble cutting players. They just cut their second round pick, Elena Chineke, today, Sunday, May 14th. And so between like them not really zeroing in on a prospect that they were all in on and questions about whether that player would make the roster anyway, and being able to get picks in the 2024 and 2025 drafts, which are widely considered to be very good drafts, I think it makes total sense all around. And that goes back to kind of what I was saying about Mike Thibault being so shrewd in the draft, being able to pull off things like this. But yeah, he's been flipping a lot of picks since since a couple of years ago in the draft. Just seems to be dealing them like crazy. So that's not out of character for him at all lately.
So I think adding a young piece like Shakira Austin last year, it really had to do with just kind of her potential and her being able to fit into the lineup. And I was hoping maybe for something else like that, but I see exactly where you're coming from there. And that makes sense from a Mystic standpoint, looking at the draft. They are a very deep team. And that leads me to my next question, Jen. Do you think this is a team that, or I guess, who do you like on the edges of this roster, rather? Who do you think could make the cut?
Yeah, so this requires me to do some like mental math and like lay out who's still here. But there are 6 players on protected contracts. So you've got Sykes, Atkins, Cloud, Hines-Allen, Deladon, and Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. Those players are all on protected contracts and therefore safe. I think Kristi Tolliver is pretty clearly safe in this discussion. I expect Amanda Zawabi to make the team as the backup center. Who am I forgetting? I've already forgotten my math, but
we're at 8 right now. I've been counting over here.
Okay, good. I'm like, I don't know if I can lay out all these people. But essentially on the fringes, you've got Tiana Hawkins, Emily Engsler, Lee Mung, Jasmine Jones, and who am I forgetting? Is there one more? Or is that it?
I'm at 12 right now, which is right around the number we're looking. Do you think they'll keep 12 or
I'm
11?
pulling up their roster because I think I forgot somebody, and I sincerely apologize to that. Oh, Shakira Austin, who is
Okay,
also
I
safe
was
but is not on
wondering.
a guaranteed contract. Okay, so all right, so on the bubble, Hawkins, Engsler, Jones, Mung. So, I mean, those are some great options, and it kind of depends on how big the Mystics want this roster to be. Do you want to carry 6 post players? That seems like a lot. The Mystics are only going to go to 11 based on contracts. So you can essentially go 6 guards and 5 post players, or the opposite. And, I was kind of surprised they waived Chineke for this reason. I thought she might kind of slot in as like the last guard there. They seem to be high on Jasmine Jones, who is maybe the closest thing to that like small forward wing position at 6 feet tall. So she might fit just from a positional standpoint if they do want to get a little bit closer to that Alicia Clark type. She had a really good offseason in Israel and seems to be playing very confidently and within herself. Eric joked about how a couple of years ago she was always trying for these home run plays and would like jump over the bench, like trying to go for a ball out of bounds. And now she's like making the like good, reliable play. So they seem high on her. Lee Mung can shoot the heck out of the ball. She's been sometimes a little bit hesitant to do so, but when she lets it fly without hesitating, it's been going in from what I've seen. Emily Engsler has a ton of potential. She was the number 4 pick a year ago by Indiana, and she can kind of do it all. I think she said herself, she's not going to be the player that scores 30, but she's going to be the one who kind of pads the stat sheet all over. And I think, if she makes this roster, it's going to be a really great place for her to kind of learn and develop, kind of like Hines Allen did her first couple of years in Washington. She was a 2nd round pick. She barely got off the bench, but when you saw her in practice, she was just she looked like herself today. She was like, using her strength, like getting through people, getting to the rim, looking impressive. And if Engsler can kind of learn behind Hines Allen and Deladon and all these folks, she could really blossom in a year or two. And then Tiana Hawkins is just a super reliable vet, has looked really good in the preseason games, and is also just a huge, hard to overstate piece of their like locker room and culture. She's been with the Mystics a long time, but took a brief stint in Atlanta. And when the Mystics brought her back, the like joy that everyone felt at like having her in their locker room just kind of overflowed, and it was amazing to see. So she may, even if the Mystics are like, well, maybe we don't want to keep this many bigs, they decide to go with the vet anyway. Even though they may not be able to play all of them, but at that point you may be looking for a culture piece as well, and you may opt for the vet over the young player there as well. So it's a really tough decision. Eric Thibault betrayed no hints about which way he would go today at practice, and I think it's going to be a tough call for them. But it's a good problem to have.
That's a very good point. I'm hoping for Emily Insler. I am here based in Indiana, so I was high on her last year with the Fever. I actually went to the last game against the Mystics where she spent some good time guarding Elena Deladon. That not a fair matchup, but like she really put in the work, and I was a little surprised. I'm hoping for her chances at the end of that roster, but like you said, a lot of great options for this Washington Mystics team. Good problem to have. I'm curious, on the other side, are you concerned? Do you have any concerns for this team? What do you think are the weaknesses for the Mystics?
We talked about the shooting before, and that's something that I would like to see happen. I can be a little bit like, I see a roadmap for them to be better shooting the ball, and I see it, but I would like to see it on the court. I think defensively, I don't have questions about them. I think they're going to be great defensively, and it's just a matter of like them getting comfortable with each other. I think, I think we'll know a lot more about that once they play a couple games and maybe get exposed in certain areas, which is not like every team gets exposed in some areas in their first couple games. And so it's easy to say like now, like, oh, they look great in the preseason. They've got all these great pieces on paper. And I think the first couple games, particularly against the quality of opponents, they've got New York for the season opener. So like start out with one of the top two teams, and then they go to Connecticut. So no rest for the weary. And then they play Connecticut again. So that's like a heck of an opening stretch. And I think we'll know a lot more about them then. And I'm also just curious to see, we talked about Sykes and Tolliver and Zowie B, and Christy Tolliver's been like kind of hurt and unavailable past couple of years, like hasn't played like a ton of games. And then Amanda Zowie B wasn't in the league last year. Her contract was suspended by LA. So kind of just like they look good so far in camp, but like how will they look when they get back to live action? So curious to see that too.
Of course, a couple of injuries always lingering around the Mystics. We are hopeful for them this season. I do want to ask one more question about Shakira Austin. We've seen a lot of great developments. You mentioned Maisha Hines-Allen, but Natasha Cloud, Ariel Atkins, some just great improvement. What do you expect to see from Shakira Austin in year two?
Oh my gosh. This offseason she played in Israel and she won MVP of the Israeli League. She also won Finals MVP, won a title. I actually just wrote about this because several Mystics players were in Israel, so you can imagine all the trash talking and bucket getting and all that. So I just wrote about this, but Shakira had a great season by any measure in Israel, and she crucially took on a much bigger role. She's like pushing the ball in transition herself and like going coast to coast. She like took a couple threes. She was just kind of like doing everything like very like unicorn style, and being great at all of it. And now she has to kind of figure out how to take that and like scale it to fit in the Mystic system, right? Like Elena Deladon is going to be option A whenever she's on the court. And Shakira can bring some of that like same energy while still fitting into what the Mystics do and the other personnel. So, I was talking to Eric Thibault about her actually, and he pointed out like, so first of all, last year the Mystics ran like pretty much no plays for Shakira Austin. And this year they're hoping to like let her do a little bit more than she got to do last year, which was kind of like do all the grunt work and like get some offensive rebounds and stick them back in and be a good defender, like very like things that you don't necessarily notice all the time. And, Eric said, it doesn't take us running that many more plays for her to go from the 9 points a game she averaged last year to like 14 or 15. That's like 2 or 3 more plays. That's like not a huge difference. And so she just mostly needs to like keep doing what she's doing, be confident doing it, and then can also sprinkle in, maybe some more elbow jumpers than we saw from her last year, maybe a little bit more putting the ball on the ground, maybe not from the other end of the court, but, from the elbow, like making some moves off the dribble, like just like a little more versatility at the margins, and that'll unlock just, a lot of possibility. And for her too, I think playing with Elena Deladon every game is going to be a boost for her as well.
So excited to see what Shaq Austin can become in this league. Kira is incredible. But yeah, as we get into kind of the end of this podcast, I want to get into some fun predictions. So first and foremost, I guess consensus comes through as maybe a top 3 team, potentially in that 3rd spot heading into the year. What tier do you see this team being in?
Yeah, I think they fit right there. 3rd best team, maybe not quite on par with Vegas and New York in the regular season, but certainly a threat in the postseason. Can really challenge them. And then like, who knows, right? Like Mike Thibault always used to say, like, just got to get to the postseason. And then who knows, like, we just got to get there and we got to be healthy. So I think they slot right in as the 3rd best team, and maybe they'll have, an upset or 2 in store in the regular season. In the postseason, we'll see.
And with the predictions, do you see, or do you have like a win-loss number that you like for that?
I know what the sports books say. I haven't thought too much about it myself because so much can happen, right? Particularly with when your MVP has a history of back injuries. So I kind of try to stay away from the projection, but I believe Caesars has it at 25.5 on a 40 game schedule. So that's pretty good. That's like 26 and 14. So
26 and 14 feels. I honestly, I feel confident about that, or maybe even up to 28 wins on this season. So I'll take the over there. How about for the MVP of this team specifically in the
All right.
2023 season?
Think you got to put the money on Deladon with how healthy and strong she's looking. She told us she's never been stronger in terms of like her weight room numbers, and that's really translating on the court. So never bet against Elena Deladon.
Like to hear that. Most improved player.
Again, just for this team, right?
Yep, just for this team.
I'll say, oh, this is hard. I was gonna say Shakira Austin, but I also think it could be Maisha if she's back healthy and
Ooh.
feeling good. But I'll stick with my first answer. I'll say Shakira Austin, assuming she gets enough touches to show that. I think she'll take a leap.
Either one of those would be exciting coming into this season, but definitely Shakira Austin. Sixth player of the year. Who do you like coming off the bench for this team?
Oh, gosh, there are lots of options. That's honestly like if you're looking for reasons to feel bullish about this team, I think the bench was a little bit of a challenge at times last season for the Mystics, and I think they've totally shored that up. I mean, you've got Christy Tolliver, Shatori Walker Kimbrough, Maisha Hines Allen, and Amanda Zawi B coming off your bench. Like that's pretty good. I'll say, you know, I could go with Maisha here. Shatori has also looked really good. She kind of played Shakira Austin's foil in Israel. She's still bitter about not winning MVP herself because that came with a nice little cash bonus. So Shatori's a little bit bitter. I'll let them share it. Can I let them share it? We'll say Maisha and Shatori.
You know, I'm fine as long as it's that pairing together because they are quite fun, and I'm a fan of them.
Right. They're so delightful. I like can't take it away from either of them.
Yep, right there with you. Defensive Player of the Year. Is this Shakira Austin's award, or I mean there are a lot of options here too with Natasha Cloud, Ariel Atkins, Brittany Sykes.
I think this is like break the award into as many little pieces as you can and like give everyone a slice, right? Like how do you give it to one person when their starting lineup or all three of their guards have combined for like 10 all defensive team nominations? Like I think there's like almost no wrong answers on this front. I will give it to Ariel Atkins because she already has 5 all defensive team selections to her name. Like every year she's been in this league, she's had one. And I think she's going to be as big of a piece as any of those guards. And so like tiebreak goes to Ariel Atkins on that one.
I think that's a really, really good call. I was thinking between Natasha and Shakira Austin, but I think Ariel Atkins. What an unreal statement! All defensive team, all 5 years of her career. But yeah,
I mean,
I like that call.
I'm okay if we want to like let them play a one-on-one tournament for it.
There we go.
Like just everybody like line up and it's like last player standing. Like I'm good with that too.
Well, let's just put them all on the all defensive team. Never mind defensive player of the year. That works over here.
There you go.
Okay, rookie of the year. That's a little tough. So I also open it up to newcomer. Who do you like for this award for the Mystics?
I'll say Brittany Sykes. I think she's going to be a big piece for them. Seems to just fit right in with everybody, just slotted right in there, and that perimeter defense is going to be scary.
I like it. And now, lastly, 3 superlatives for this team. Who's the unsung hero of the Mystics?
You know, my first instinct is to say Shakira Austin, but she might get her name sung a little bit more this year. Like I'm not sure if she's going to count by the end of the year. But I'll say her if you'll allow it, because I think like she gets a lot of buzz, but she still I don't think gets enough credit for all the like things that she does that aren't like highlight plays.
So I'm hopeful that her name does get a little bit more praise at the end of the year. Natasha Cloud, I feel like tosses her name out there enough, which helps because she could fit into that category.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like maybe Ariel Atkins doesn't do a lot of talking. I'll take Shakira Austin from your pitch though. That works. The class
Yeah,
clown.
yeah,
Oh,
the interesting thing, I think if like Shakira does start getting like more of that attention to be a sung hero, I wonder if like people start sleeping a little bit more on Ariel Atkins because she has gotten credit in the past for her scoring ability, but like does she kind of like fade into the background of people's consciousness, which would be like unfair of people, but like maybe with all the stars on the Mystics teams, she kind of gets overlooked a little bit.
yeah, I'm curious about that. Okay, so these last two awards here, the class clown.
The entire team. This team is so funny. Like at practice today, I was just like literally listening to like all of their side conversations with each other and was just like cracking up. I guess Natasha Cloud is kind of like the instigator of a lot of that. So I'll get, she's kind of, kind of the ringleader of this, so I'll give her the award, but it's really a whole team thing.
And kind of along the same lines, the best trash talker. Just to who is it for this team?
Oh,
This is a tough one too.
wow, that is a good question. I might have to like poll the Mystics on this to see what they would say. Um, right now I'm gonna give it to Shakira. I know for a fact that she is trash talking when the opportunity arises toward Shatori and Jasmine Jones about playing in Israel against them. So I know she's trash talking in that respect, and I think she'll like only grow into that as the seasons progress in the W as well.
A lot of good options for this one too, though. I like the Shakira Austin pick though. All right, Jenn, thank you so much for joining us here. I guess lastly here, can you tell everybody where they can find your work?
Sure, yeah. As you mentioned in the intro, I write for The Next, which is thenexthoops.com. So you can find me there. And on Twitter, I'm at Jenn Hatfield 1. That's Jen with 2 N's.
Jenn, thank you so much for joining us here on a pro basketball show. Love all the work that you are doing. So excited for this 2023 Mystics season. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into a pro basketball show. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Until next time, I am Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.